Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Kyle, and for today's Tools Day, we're gonna talk about finding square and the multiple ways you can go about doing that. First, however, make sure if you haven't hit that subscribe button, you do that, or turn on your notification bell, that way you don't miss any future episodes. And with that being said, let's get into it. So what we're going to do in this video was I wanted to talk about what actually square is and how to find square, whether it's on the job site or maybe a project at home. Maybe you're laying out a flower bed or you're doing a concrete pad or a sidewalk, whatever that is. Easy ways to find square up to expensive ways to find square. And what I mean by that is we use the Stabila LA180L layout station, which if you wait till the end, I'll show you how that works and how you can get some really accurate square lines on large scale. But to start off, let's talk about what square is. We all know what a square is. It's a four-sided object with equal sides and 90-degree angles in all four corners. Now in the building world, square is everything. Everything, well, mostly is needed to be perfectly 90 degrees in relation to one another on a wall, on a floor, on a foundation. Really, square to me is, the utmost importance. And so I think it's so important to understand it and to know how to effectively find it when you're building something, because if you're not square from the beginning, you'll never end square. It's so important whenever doing any project to start off perfect as possible. We all remember sitting in math class and someone raising their hand and saying, why do I need to learn this? When am I ever going to use it? And I was never one of those people because I enjoyed math, and maybe you can tell that because I'm always talking about it. But I think you can use math to make your job so much easier. Now we're going to start off, and this is not a math lesson, so stick with me. We're going to start off with the Pythagorean theorem. So if you don't know what that is, that basically states that with any triangle that has one side of, let's just say 3 foot, another side of 4 foot, if your diagonal is 5 foot, that 3, 4, 5 triangle is going to always give you a perfect square right angle, and it is used all the time in building trades. So I'll do a quick representation of exactly what I mean by that by just making a little drawing here. We're just going to go ahead and mark 3 inches, draw a line. So we've got our 3-inch line. If we do a 4-inch line here, this diagonal should be 5 inches. So what we've got there is a perfect 90-degree angle on a wall. So whenever laying anything out, if you do a 3, 4 and measure a 5 diagonal to your 2 points, that should be perfectly square. Now the problem is 3, 4, 5 isn't always usable, but you can expand that with any multiple of 3, 4, 5. So if we get into a bigger triangle, let's say you're laying out a wall that's 20 foot long, you can use bigger numbers as long as it's a multiple of the same number. What I mean by that is if you're going to go 3 times 4, which is 12, so you go 12 foot down this line, you're going to go 4 times 4, which is 16 down this line. That means your hypotenuse or diagonal needs to be 5 times 4 or 20. So hopefully that makes sense, and that's about as much math as we're going to do, because what I like to do is I've got this smart device, and I've used it many times on the job site, and I use a calculator app called Construction Master Pro. Now I think it's $20 some on the Apple Store. I don't know if it's on Android, I haven't looked, but I'll throw a link down below if I remember. It's super handy. You can do so many different layout dimensions, adding, subtracting dimensions, whatever you really need to do, this app does do it, and it does it very well. I can type in any number that I want on this app. Let's say we're doing, we're doing an 8-foot wall, and I've got a 21-foot wall the other way. Those don't divide by 3, 4, and 5 very easily. I can type in 8 as a rise, I can type in 20 as a run, and it will give me the exact diagonal dimension that I can use to check. And the reason that is important versus just going by a 3, 4, 0.5 multiple is anytime you can expand that number of any of those dimensions, the biggest possible, which in this case, the exact dimension of the wall, you're gonna be the most accurate. So whenever laying anything out, if you were just to use a little square, it's not gonna be as accurate on large scale. So make the numbers as big as possible, check your square as big as possible. The problem is, the bigger it gets, the more cumbersome it is to make those dimensions. Most tape measures that people have maybe are only gonna be 25 foot. So once you get past 25 foot, how do you really accurately check for square? So that's what we're gonna get into with the layout station. But before we get into the bigger scale, let's do a quick representation of, let's say you're laying out a building, because that's what I do a lot of, or you could think of it like a garden, or you could think of it like a concrete pad. Maybe you're making a basketball court for your kids' new basketball hoop you're gonna buy them. I've got 4 boards here that I cut, and they're cut for equal dimensions because let's say, this is the size of whatever square that you want to make. Now, how do you make sure that they're all square to each other versus kind of like a parallelogram? You don't want this. You want them to be perfectly square. Now, if you're doing really small ones, it's pretty easy. You can take a framing square and you can line them up just as perfectly as possible. But this is we're trying to represent large scale. Think of this like 40 feet by 20 feet. Well, we already talked about the Pythagorean theorem. We can come down here and we can get dimensions off of this wall. Let's say 4 times 4 was, I don't know if I can do that. Is this? Yes. 4 times 4 is 16. So we're gonna come down here. We can mark 16. And if we come down this guy, 3 times 4 is 12. We can mark 12 down this end. And you can take your tape measure and measure 16 inches, or sorry, 20 inches, because 5 times 4 is 20, not 16, Kyle. And you can move this board so that 20 is on this point right here, and your end of your tape measure is hitting your 12-inch line on that line. So once you do that, you will have 2 square lines. But when doing all 4, once you have the proper dimension, so everything is the same on all 4 corners for your dimension, what you're gonna do is use your diagonal measurements to determine it to be square. So you can have a perfectly laid out line, and if I show you this, these are all gonna read the same dimensions. Your sides are gonna be the same, all these certain ways, but it's not square. Obviously, this is very extreme. If I check my diagonals, let's just say for reference, 19, this one is almost 27, okay? So it's not the same. Your goal is to have equal dimensions on all 4 sides and the same diagonal measurement when you measure it from diagonals. So this one's 23 and this one is 23. So hopefully that makes sense. It's not just doing one corner, you need to do all 4 corners and then check your diagonals. So that's kind of a small diagram and a small representation, but let's get into a larger scale and I'll show you guys more applicable how we make that work. All right, guys, we're outside here, and this is more of a real-world application. This could be a building, a concrete pad, a garden, really anything, just gonna be large scale. Now, what I typically use is some steel tapes. So if you use a nylon tape, they can stretch a lot on large distances. So what I've got is some 300-foot steel tapes with a nylon clad and some simple screwdrivers. This, for me, is the easiest way to lay out and square up a large layout. Now, what we're gonna do is, just for simplicity's sake, we're gonna set one of these screwdrivers in the ground on the tape. And let's imagine we're gonna lay out, we'll just do, quite large, but not, oops. Let's flip this over so we can see the numbers. And we're gonna go ahead and go, let's just go 30 feet. All right, now, here at 30 feet, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put another tape in with a screwdriver. You want to make sure you kind of pull it. Now this is what's important. This is going to be what we would consider our control line and the line that never moves. But this kind of gets into a way deeper video, and maybe I could make that in the future. Specifically, right now we're just trying to square up 4 walls basically. So I'm going to set this screwdriver right at 30. But in a real application, you want to make sure that this is set off of whatever your control point is. For me, doing buildings, a lot of times, I got to make sure I'm off of a lot line. So there's certain setbacks I got to follow for zoning, or maybe a customer wants me to square up to an existing building. And this line that I just pulled out would be the first one I make, and it's the most important. Now what we're going to do, since we've got our 30-foot dimension, let's say we're going to go 20 foot on the other wall. I'm going to take these 2 tapes that I just have now, and I am going to go back to 20 foot with this tape. I'm going to find 20 foot, and this is my diagonal. So inside, you guys remember we talked about the 3, 4, 5 triangle and the Pythagorean theorem. What I now need to do is I'm going to go into that Construction Master Pro calculator app. I'm going to go 30-foot run, 20-foot rise. I need to have a diagonal measurement of 36 foot 11/16. 36 foot and 11/16. So I'm going to find 36 foot and 11/16, which is, you know, basically right under 3/4. And I need to put that on my 20-foot dimension. So I found 20 foot on my other tape, 36 foot and 11/16. Kind of hard to see there. Come on. Okay, now right here, I'm going to pull these taut. You don't want to stretch them too hard, because even a metal tape, it will stretch, not on a 20 by 30 building, but when we get into like a 144-foot building, you can stretch. So I'm going to find those points, and I'm going to stick a screwdriver there. Now this is going to basically reference a square corner or a square wall. I now have 2 square walls. Now you might be saying, okay, well, let's get the 4th one. All right, let's do that. We're going to take the tapes that are already on that control line, and we're going to do the exact same thing, only over here. So I'm going to wind up this one I had for the diagonal, and I'm going to find 20 foot. Where's 20? All right, 20 foot. And I'm going to stretch this one out, which is now my diagonal, to 36 foot and 11/16. So now 36 foot, 11/16, 20 foot. I pull them taut, and if I had another screwdriver, I'd set it right there, and that would be my 4 corners. And that is exactly how you can very efficiently and very effectively square up any structure, any building, any 4-cornered thing, I guess. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's very easy and very simple. But I want to show you guys the layout station from Stabila that I talked about, and how effortless that is, but also how precise it is and how easy it is to do it with one person. Now, you might be saying, Kyle, you just did this with one person. Well, there's a lot of room for error because we are on a little bit of a slope. When I put a screwdriver in the ground on this tape measure, it might be a 1/16, an 1/8, a 1/4 inch off. I might be moving it in the dirt. Let's go in and I'll show you how precise the layout station is. And we kind of got to go inside, I think, to really show you guys how cool it is, because you'll be able to see the laser and what it's doing. Now I've shown you guys how to use math, the Pythagorean theorem, to find square on 2 sets of lines using the 3, 4, 5 triangle, or a multiple of 3, 4, 5, or the calculator. And we went outside and I showed you guys how to, really square up a larger 4-lined, I guess, building or project or really whatever, using that Construction Master Pro app as well. But for those of you that don't like math and just love cool tools, what I got here is the Stabila LA180L layout station. And this thing will give you square. It will give you almost perfect square, 3/32 of an inch accuracy on 100 foot. and it works within a 300-foot range of this receiver. Let me show you how this thing works, okay? So what we've got is, they call this the 180 because it will put out a 180-degree line, and it will give you your square 90-degree line off of it. They also have a 90L, which is only gonna have one. It's not gonna go both ways, it's just gonna have a 90-degree angle. So what we're gonna do is, let's assume, just for simplistic nature, this is actually a tool that you would use if you're gonna be doing more complex layouts, I think, and that's what's gonna be the best. But what we've got is, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this thing on, and what you're gonna see is the lasers turn on, and it's gonna put a plumb line, or a plumb laser line down on the ground. So you can see the plumb line right here, and it's actually moving. I'm gonna move the laser just so you can get a good feeling for how much movement it does. Okay, you can see it's kind of moving, and what it's doing is it's self-leveling right now. It's finishing up, it's not very loud, and what we've got is this guy right here is putting out a 180-degree line all the way this way. You can see it a little bit here, you can see it on the concrete right here. And then we've got this 90-degree that's coming right across me. What this represents is, let's say this line that's in my concrete here is what my constant line was outside, and I want to get a perfect line this way. I take the receiver, and this receiver actually will talk to the laser itself, and you're gonna see it happen. It's pretty cool, and that's what makes this tool specifically so special. So I'm gonna turn this on, and I think the demo of this always kind of sells itself. It tells you the whole story on what's gonna happen, because this is a pretty standard, this is a pretty standard tool that you see whenever working with lasers, and it helps you read the laser beam, because outside you can't see the laser, and that's why we're inside, so hopefully you can see it. So, now if I come down here, I can see the laser right here. So it's right on the side of this board, but I want it to be right on this line that I've got on my concrete. Now I could physically move my laser, and that's something that you can do when you're working on small distances. But remember, this is a layout tool for large distances. So I've got my receiver here, and I want that to be right over here. All I'm gonna do, let me pull this back out. I'm gonna turn it on, which I did, and I'm gonna hold down this little, almost like bullseye button till it flashes. And I'm gonna set this right there. Now what this laser is gonna do, the layout station automatically will always go one way, and then it comes back, and it's gonna find my receiver. Check this out. Now, when that cross goes away, this thing stops talking to that laser, tells it to stay put, and now I can take this and mark anywhere. I mean, I could go 100 foot. I could go way back here, and I can find exactly where that line is. So that line will not move, and it goes all the way. You can actually see it, I think, all the way back here against my garage door, right here. So this line is going all the way up the garage door, and it goes all the way on the ceiling. So you've got this 180-degree line that is basically your reference point, your line that you were squaring off of. But the beauty of this tool is that it gives me a perfect 90-degree line perpendicular to this. So when you have the setup, I now can go over here, and anywhere in this plane, you can see I'm hitting the laser. Right there is 90 degrees perpendicular to that. Now you might be saying, but Kyle, outside, man, you did that basically with some tape measures. You did that with probably less than $50 in equipment. This laser is $14.99 over on Amazon. However, the thing you have to remember is that outside I was on a slope. If I go ahead and pull square and try to square up a layout on a slope, a tape measure doesn't do good unless everything is in the same plane. With this tool, you can basically find square on anything. So imagine you've got a step down in a concrete wall. It's really hard to pull a tape measure and then have an 8-foot level or something, making sure that your tape is straight right where you want it. And I know this might not make sense to the average DIY person that might just be looking to figure out, hey man, how do I make a 3x5 box square for my garden? But anybody that's ever done any sort of, complicated layout or done anything in building a house or any real application that requires maybe more complexity is gonna see how this tool will give you accurate results with really the push of a button, because I don't have to pull out a tape measure and get a square. It's going to give me that square line just by using this receiver, and it's going to give it to me in the entire plane. So I can find what's square here, I can find what's square down here, and I hope that makes sense. This tool has become so effective for us because when we're laying out on foundations, and you guys might have seen it, whether it be on the Dream Shop build or the hunting cabin layout, we always have to pull and make sure things are perfect before we start, because the layout, the building, the beginning of the project is the most important. And I know it's $1,500, but that comfort, knowing that I'm perfect at the layout at the beginning, is going to save me money in the long run, because I'm going to spend less time trying to make things work, because they will have started square, started perfect, and that means I have a better chance of ending square and ending perfect, and I don't have to go back and fix something, because this is always going to be accurate. Now, one last thing I'll show you on this layout station, and what's really great, and I think I'll show you one more quick demo, is, if I'm a concrete guy, let me turn this off. If I'm a concrete guy, this is like a no-brainer, because once you've also got your layout done, I can turn this other laser on, and it's going to give me a perfect horizontal line that I can use the receiver with as a grade stick. So I can then put this on my grade stick, and let's say you're laying out a footing, which is usually in a trench. Maybe you've got some drops in your footings or on your wall. That's really hard to pull a tape and be accurate with those measurements because of those drops. You can use this as your grade stick and your layout all in one. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, by all means, reach out to me and ask me, because I think this is a little bit higher level than just going over a 3, 4, 5 square. But I wanted to start there, and I wanted to work my way up, and hopefully this helps somebody out. Let me know down in the comments. I would appreciate you give me some feedback, and if there's some more detailed explanation that I need to do, I could always do that in a future build video or a future video like this. So thanks a lot. You guys have a good one, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.